Alrighty, well, today is officially fall, September 23rd. I believe this is the first day of fall, and we've got cool temperatures here in northern Illinois. It's been the coldest it's been all year, 55 degrees at night and 65 during the day, which is amazing. And storm system's rolling through. I'm headed to Wisconsin in a couple days. Looking forward to this season. Gonna be amazing. But you know what, I thought I'd share a bunch of tips with you guys about small acreage hunting and hunting fence rows. It's something that people don't really talk about a lot, but I personally have had a lot of success. If you've watched our show over the years, the last 10-12 years, I've killed a lot of big bucks, and I don't think I've ever really explained where I was killing them, but most of them have been all on small 12 and under acres pieces of property, and a lot of those bucks have been killed on fence rows. Now, there's a lot of benefits to hunting small pieces of property. First of all, small pieces of property are typically easier to access or get access to. You know, a backyard, a private homeowner that owns five or 6 acres is easier to find than a giant 200-acre lease, especially in the area that we live in. There's not a lot of big available woodlots. Most of them are leased up, family farms. It's impossible to get access unless you know somebody. So when it comes to door knocking and looking for pieces to hunt, the small acreage is actually much easier to find. And there's more of them, obviously. So I typically do a lot of door knocking this time of the year, actually all year, to try to gain access to the small pieces of property. But what I'm looking for is what it connects to. And I know a lot of people don't talk about this, but you really want to find good small pieces of property that potentially connect to those larger scale spots. Number one tactic I use when looking for small parcels, I drive the roads. I drive the roads all year. I consistently check different little pieces of property because everyone's a little different. Some small pieces of property are really good early, some are rut spots, and some are late. So for example, 2018 when I shot Carl, that piece of property is 12 acres, and what it was one fence line that connected a very good wood lot. I had some food down there, but I killed Carl on a fence row, and that's the only place that I was hunting. There was no available woods to even hunt on that piece of property, and in that situation I had a doe come through, and he was basically trying to corral her back to the cover, which was along the fence row. That was kind of their main escape route. It seemed like they felt very comfortable there. And what I was doing throughout the year in that particular spot was just moving in and moving out, moving in and moving out based on wind directions, and going to that one tree where I had a lot of cover on that fence row. Now, fence rows have some disadvantages as well. That particular spot where I shot Carl, I had a bunch of corn around me, so I was able to get in without being detected. Now when the crops are down and there's maybe beans and you've got a wide open fence row that connects 2 pieces of timber, and there's probably 3 or 4 different trees to choose from, when you get up in that big tree that looks like the best vantage point, it's also one of the best vantage points for deer to see you. You typically stick out really wide open in fence rows. And deer have a tendency to get to the edge of the woodlots, maybe the woodlots that you're hunting or hoping the deer come from, and they tend to scan a lot before they go out in those wide open fields. So you'd be amazed when you see a hunter down a fence row in a wide open tree. He thinks he's undetected. Those deer can see you from forever away. So always keep that in mind when hunting fence rows. And definitely the other big positive thing is stay low in the tree. Believe it or not, if you can just get a lot of cover and stay low in maybe a bush, or I've taken buckthorn and putting them all together and ratcheted and put your stand up in there, something low tends to be a little bit better as far as cover is concerned, and access getting in and out and up in that tree stand, making the movement and getting away with it. The next buck I'd like to talk about on a small piece of property was a buck that I shot on the ground. So the buck I shot on the ground was on December 9th. Kind of post-rut. There was a little bit of rut activity going on after that, or during that time period, but it's the same thing. Now, it was just a fence row, and all I had done was built a little small makeshift blind because that particular property had no trees available. I mean, there was nothing. Everything was just kind of like this wispy honeysuckle and buckthorn. So we decided to put that little ground blind on the ground. But throughout the entire year, what I wanted to stress was I'm just going in and out and in and out along that fence row, getting on the ground, waiting for those deer to come into those fields. Now, it took me till December 9th to harvest that deer, but I shot him at 18 yards on the ground, double lung. He went 60 yards and fell over dead. And I had probably hunted that spot 30 times before that. One of the other benefits of hunting a fence row is I feel like you can put a lot of pressure on it as long as you're not extending to where you think those deer are, using it the most. So I basically had a trail cut all the way through there, and I would go in and out, 30 different times I hunted that. And when I make my decision on when to hunt it, I would just basically hunt every single wind except the south, which is where the deer were coming from. So they would typically come from in front of me, work their way, and then get into the field. That particular day, that was a west wind. The wind was blowing straight into the field, which most people would have probably thought that's not the best wind to hunt, because if the deer get in the field, obviously you blow them out. But I take my chances on the wind. I'm pretty much what you call a 50-50 hunter. I'll do right on the line of having a good wind for the deer and also a good wind for me, and pretty much right when they hit that line is when you got to be shooting. So I try to keep that line out in front of me, whichever way the direction is. Obviously, if the wind's going the wrong direction, big bucks don't have a tendency to really stick around much if they get a whiff of you. They just won't. So that was a really cool hunt. That deer ended up going in the high 150s, and he was all broken up. But amazing deer, an amazing encounter, amazing ground and pound hunt, one that I'll never forget, and one that I've been doing, beyond that, taught me that I could do that a lot more and get away with it and still self-film and catch everything on camera. But that was a mid-December hunt, still on a tree line. Now back to small acreage property. Last year, I believe it was January 7th, there was only a week left in the season. I was hunting another very small piece of property. Now this property I had walked, I had known for a long time. I had scouted it a lot from the road. I was granted permission, and it really worked out to my favor. But with the small tracks, like I was saying before, the one thing that I do a lot, and I have the ability to do this probably more than most because I own my own company and I'm always traveling around. I spend a lot of time in the car. I watch from the road like crazy. Early in the morning, later in the afternoon. I do monitor it with a little bit of trail cameras, but I don't tend to go into some of these areas very much. I'd rather watch them from a long distance. Now that was one of those small pieces of property. It was only, now that one was 20 acres, but only 15 of it was huntable. And really what it did was it backed up to a piece of property that was unhuntable. The deer really never spent any time on that property until it was time to feed. So what they would do was bed on the neighbors, and then they would work their way through, browse on some of the stuff that I caught them browsing on, and then go to some large destination fields on the opposite side of the road. Some of the downsides though of small acreage hunting. One big thing is, when you're hunting in a backyard or a small piece of property in a suburban area, you're gonna run into little Jimmy and Johnny walking their dogs and BB guns in the woods on November 6th when you're sitting there. Lawnmowers, landscapers, people out doing work, sitting next to highways, or parking lots, or there's a lot of road activity out there. That is one of the downsides to small acreage. A lot of times when people give you permission, that's the other thing. When you ask for permission on some of these small spots, what I tend to do, and this is a secret, but I'm going to tell you, I only ask for a window. So after monitoring that particular piece of property for whatever, the year before or that season, I'll tend to get like a feel for when the deer are there. If it's an early season spot with maybe say a bunch of apple trees and acorns, and then once the deer are in there early, and then once we lose the leaves, the deer vanish, or once the corn is picked, the deer vanish, maybe that be the case. When you go to ask for that particular piece of property and the people are on the fence, I typically give them a time frame. So I'll say, you know what, would you allow me to bow hunt from, say, October 1st through October 14th? that normally will get you in. You know, that's the thing that people will say, you know what, yes, bow and arrow, okay, fine. You're only gonna be here for a long time. People automatically think when you ask for permission that they are giving you permission, your buddies permission, guns blazing, dogs running all over the place. You know, they just have a different kind of mindset when it comes to that stuff. So you really have to break it down and explain to them. And it's in your best interest to just follow when that small acreage has got those deer. And if you show the person a bunch of respect, you bring back garbage, you show them some gratitude, they'll typically give you permission for the rest of the year, or maybe even say the following year. In my case, I always typically will barter a bunch of work, you know, offer my services, whether it be bobcat or brickwork or, you know, leaf remover, snow removal, any of that stuff, which always helps as well. You can always throw the money at them, but, you know, most people don't like that because of liability reasons. So be very specific when it comes to asking, and you don't necessarily need the whole season on a lot of these small acreage spots. You only need those little windows. The other spot that I killed the buck with on the ground, that's a rut spot. Clearly a rut spot. There's a few does that live in there, and we would get piles of different bucks running through there. And this was one of those late post-rut big bucks that came in checking for does. Got lucky. But I've noticed a lot of those over the last couple of years, and I will definitely be door knocking some of my local area spots where they're sleeper spots. You know, people would never expect to go hunt them, but I've seen more deer camped out on these fence rows and big giant bucks with does away from all the good normal stuff. You know, when it comes to the rut, big bucks like to push deer or does into areas where there's normally not people, or there's normally not other deer. They get in those weird spots, they get in those backyard spots because they're with their ladies and that's what they want to do. They don't want to be with everybody else. They don't like the competition, so they go to those goofy spots, and those are the ones you got to keep an eye out for during the rut, because you'd be surprised. A little 1 acre or, you know, 1 to 2 acre spot with the tree line in the back that backs up to a cornfield, that might be all you need. Or a tiny little bedding area, or a little swamp, or a CRP field with a few trees in it. That's all you need sometimes during the rut. So those small acreage spots pay off big time. You just really got to time them throughout the year. You got to do your due diligence when it comes for looking and scouting. Door knocking goes a long way, especially if you're polite, offer services up. And you know, I think it's a great way to be a successful hunter and shoot big bucks. I've done it for a long time on what most people would probably call pretty crummy pieces of property, but they've worked out really good for me. And it's funny because I've been doing this since I was 13 years old. I was never able to get the good stuff. I was always kind of getting some of the outskirts land, and persistence pays off when it comes to deer hunting. And you know, one of the misconceptions I believe right now in the hunting industry is overpressuring. Some of these small spots, like I said before, you can really overpressure them by going in and going in and going in. As long as you have the wind in your favor, I'll beat a trail down to that stand and I'll grind out some of these deer, because eventually they will make a mistake and screw up. But you have to be concealed. You know, you want to tiptoe in and tiptoe out, and you want to make sure that wind is right. So yeah, I hope some of these secrets that I've told you guys will help you in the future for or you know, this upcoming season, or you know, next year, whatever it may be. But I just thought I'd elaborate a little bit more on some of the really nice bucks that I've killed over the last couple of years that you guys have watched. You know, I never broke it down as far as what kind of properties I was hunting, and I think it's pretty interesting. And you know, small acreage properties, fence rows, you know, the land that nobody else wants. Pay attention to some of that stuff, because it can be really good for you. And like I said, it's much easier to gain access to those spots. So like I said, hope I wasn't rambling too much. Hope you guys can take a few of these little tips, put them to good use, throw some of that ammo in your arsenal, and have a good luck this season. Hope everybody is safe. Bowhunt or die.